Welcome to episode number 9 of Making It, a podcast about making things with your bare hands, hosted by the Jimmy Diresta, Bob Clagett from I Like to Make Stuff, and myself, David Picciuto, the Drunken Woodworker. And before we kick this off, if you listen to the show through iTunes, we'd like to ask you to please rate and review us as you see fit, as this helps us tremendously. With that being said, let's get started by talking about what we're working on. Jimmy.
I just finished editing my chisel restoration video, which is going to be on Make Magazine's YouTube channel. And then it will also be on my channel this weekend because I'm traveling to Arizona to work at a Dickel event. So I won't be able to put up a new video on Sunday or a uniquely new video. So the same video will appear on Make's channel and will appear on my channel of a chisel restoration. And just still ongoing with the Don Julio truck stuff that I talked about. Bob, what are you working on?
I'm finishing up a video. Well, not finishing. I'm working on a video right now for build of my 3D printer. So my 3D printer kit came in last week, and I spent last week putting it together, and it was actually pretty easy to put together, but there's a lot of little, just details. So decided to make a build video for that so people can see that it's not terribly unrealistic to put together a 3D printer on your own. And hopefully I'll have that out on Monday. So what about you, David?
Right now, I'm not working on anything, but tomorrow morning, I'm going to work on a picture frame sled. I got this really cool, I'm from Toledo, Ohio, and I got this really cool map from 1890 of Toledo, and our area is not even on the map yet. And so I want to build a picture frame for this. You can build picture frames without a table saw sled, but I want to do one again. I had a sled from my old table saw, but the runners don't line up with my new table saw compared to my old table saw. So I figured, hey, why not make a new one, show everybody how to do it, and build a picture frame from there. So I'm going to get started on that tomorrow morning. Jimmy.
I want to talk a little bit about the topic tonight. I'm going to introduce the topic for the podcast is things that intimidate us and scare us. We could be talking about tools, machines, concepts, people.
Yeah. I was wondering if this was going to go purely in the tool area or if this is going to go a little bit deeper.
No, well, I mean, there are ideas, there are materials, methods that scare us, things that we don't want to look stupid doing, so we don't do them. We just avoid them altogether. I could talk about a couple of those.
Oh, yeah.
If we want to talk about machines, I mean, we all know that we've been injured one way or another, but lately in my latest video, I use my milling machine. And whenever I turn that thing on, it whizzes up. It sounds like a helicopter starting. And you could just feel like the concrete floor vibrating a little bit. And Ooh. I just know to keep my hands away from the moving parts.
What's a milling machine?
A milling machine is a 3,000-pound chunk of steel that has several moving axes. So you could mount a chunk of steel on it, and you could literally XYZ axis. We're all familiar with that from our small electric milling machines that we use to cut wood, our CNC machines. So it's a human-controlled CNC machine, because if you want to cut in one direction, you literally dial that X, Y, or Z axis. And in the Witchblade 2, I make that little mount that goes between the Leatherman and the knife blade. And in that video, I used half of it to make it, and then the second half I did it in the shop. But the milling machine is just like this powerful, giant chunk of steel that cuts steel.
It seems like it would be a really unforgiving tool. I mean, I know most tools are, but that one seems...
Yeah. Like I said, every time I start that up, I'm like, be in the moment, remember what you're using, don't stick your fingers in the blade, and don't put your clothes near the moving parts. It's only one moving part.
It sounds scary, but as someone who's never used a machine like that, what is the scariest part about it?
Getting tangled up in the spinning motor, the spinning shaft. There's a quill. Basically the quill is what comes down when you pull the lever on a drill press. And that quill spins at various speeds. You could adjust the speed. And if you have a big mill, an end mill on it, like something, say, like an inch in diameter, it's just all the more grabby to like grab a piece of your clothing.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? Yeah. So whenever I've used it a few times, you've seen me use it in, for instance, in the anvil restoration video. I'm using a flying cutter, which is basically a big piece of steel that sticks out of it at an angle, and the whole diameter of that spinning cutter makes the cutting marks that you see on top of like machined steel. And that is really one of the most dangerous things, because it's just literally like if you stuck a screwdriver sideways in a drill and pulled the trigger, so that's really dangerous. So
that sounds horrible.
That sounds awful.
So, I mean, just, kind of relating it to like my most recent events, it's using the milling machine this week in 5-degree weather. I just had to really be careful and, that's the most important thing whenever you use a tool, is just to be aware and be conscious.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of it. There's also just like we're going to keep going on tools. There's a certain amount of like stuff that you just cannot control. Like for me, one of the things on my list was the lathe, and I've mentioned that before. Like, I just don't have the experience there, so I'm not comfortable with it. And it scares me, but I think the biggest thing about it that scares me is not anything I can control. I think it's that a piece of wood that is spinning at a high rate will have a fault in it, or, like some crazy piece of grain that's just like loosens up all of a sudden and then it just comes off, and that's something you can't plan for. You can wear a face shield, I guess, and maybe like body armor, but there's certain stuff like that no matter how careful you are, it's like there's just an inherent danger to it.
If I may add to that, I got a new lathe about a year ago and I knew nothing about it. And like you, I was completely scared. And so I had my buddy Sean come over and he showed me everything. And to have somebody show you in person gives you a little bit more confidence than watching somebody on YouTube, for sure. But I started working with small little pieces and then wearing the whole face mask and shield and everything. And I just started to build a little bit of confidence using it. I'm like, I know, like, if I'm starting off with something small, if it exploded, I'm going to be okay. I have the face mask on and everything. And so I think, working on something small and then building your way up as you build confidence is a great way.
The scariest thing about using an actual wooden lathe is if you're trying to mill a piece of square wood down. It's those initial, corners chunking off. And that's why it's best to try and get rid of them either on the table saw or in one of my recent videos, you see me milling square pieces. I use a draw knife to just cut those down, because that's what'll really grab the chisel, those like chunks. And also sometimes before you get to like the final circle, close to the circle where you're just continuously cutting wood and you're not hitting those four corners, you'll throw a big chunk of wood off. If the wood has a fissure in it or something, or a check, it'll chip the whole thing off. So it's important to get rid of those corners before you start.
That's probably part of my issue with it, because that's only about as far as I've been with it. I've only used it twice maybe, and it's always been starting with a really, big square type of thing. So I guess that hesitation makes sense.
You could take that piece of wood and just take it to the band, because cutting angles on a table saw is also dangerous too. I mean, needless to say, everything's dangerous. It's just a matter of your comfort level and obviously how careful you're being. But you could bandsaw off those corners.
That's what I do. Yeah,
it's a little bit safer. I mean, of course, we all cut angles on the table saw, but to bandsaw them off, because it doesn't need to be perfect. You just want to basically remove the majority of the material till you get down to that circle in the core of where you're trying to cut. So the most important thing about a lathe too, which is even is to listen to it. When you hear like that the end, the center, when that end center or the end stock, the center point on the end stock sometimes becomes loose or the wood wears out. You noticed on one of my videos I put crazy glue, and that's to make those, because it was a soft wood. If you're spinning a soft wood on the lathe and you hear it start to vibrate, yank the plug out, turn the switch off, or start to dial in the end stock. If you could dial the end stock in a little bit, you hear that vibration go away. But when that vibration starts and it starts like getting louder, run away, unplug it, shut it off, or tighten it. I mean, if you have,
it's a great tip.
If you have the wherewithal or the experience to instantly tighten it, you'll hear that vibration go away. Because the minute you start hearing vibration, it gets instantly worse. So the minute you hear it, it's like, oh, we got something going, and then it's just going to blow apart. So you got to make sure you tighten it right away. So if you guys are ever using the lathe and you hear that vibration, it's most often the wood that's in the center point is just starting to wear out, and you got to get it a little bit tighter.
I would imagine as you're tightening that, you also have to make sure that it's not cracking on the end there, because I've never had it happen, but I think about it all the time as I'm tightening that end stock. like, is this actually splitting the wood, and could this make it dangerous? So,
well, you just got to check, and literally, like an eighth of a turn might be enough to stop the vibration.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the tailstock. I'm going to get yelled at for not saying it. Just the tailstock and the
yes,
and the center and the tailstock. I have a hard time remembering these definitions.
I'm definitely not an expert on the lathe. I know what I'm supposed to do with each piece, but I don't know what each piece is called. Like the banjo. Why is the banjo called a banjo? That makes no sense to me.
No.
You're going to laugh. This is going to be hilarious to everybody listening. What is the banjo besides the musical instrument, and as far as the lathe goes?
It's what you rest your tool on. Correct?
Oh, is it?
Yes.
That was called a tool rest.
I thought it was a chisel perch.
Oh man,
Let's make up a new name for it right now. It's anything. It could be anything.
I'm Googling right now. Lathe banjo. Of course,
me and Dave Welder in my shop, we call it the chisel perch, and we jokingly say chisel perch is the name of a rock band in Brooklyn. Okay. Chisel perch is playing tonight.
Okay, so the banjo is the part of the lathe that holds the tool rest. So as you know, the banjo has that knob you can turn where you can move it at any angle and in and out. That's what holds the tool rest. All right.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
I've been using these things forever. I never knew that. Wow. You learned something new.
Lathe enthusiasts are going to hate this episode for sure.
Lathe, as I like to call everybody on a subject, the lathe nerds. Lathe nerds unite. Define everything. Get mad at everybody for not defining things, but don't ever make anything and don't ever make a video.
We need to do an episode where we just rant and relieve all our stresses.
I can't imagine people would enjoy that. All right, David. What about you? What's something you're afraid of?
Speaking of tools, one of my biggest fears is a router mounted in a router table. Just scares the crap out of me. I've never had any serious issues. I have had maybe the very first time I used a router and a router fence. I think I was feeding the piece in the wrong side and it shot it out. Yeah, like a pitching baseball machine that they use in practice. So I learned not to do that real quick. But now I know what side to feed the piece in. Like when you're doing pattern routing on there, you can still catch end grain or kind of wavy grain, and that piece will catch and throw it from your hands. And I've had that happen a couple times, and it's super scary.
Yeah.
And my fingers weren't even close, but it's enough to make you step back and think, this is a really powerful machine. And Jimmy and I were discussing earlier, before we hit the record button, that I used to use and forgive me, I might not be using the right terms again, but the two fluted bits, the straight bits. And somebody tipped me off, you should use the spiral bits because they don't catch as much. And so that's what I've been using. They're really expensive. It's like an $80 bit, but you get a much cleaner cut and it's much safer. And I think, Jimmy, you had some insight on why that bit works better.
Oh, well, because it's it's the same principle as if you're using a hand plane, like a small low angle block plane, for instance, and you hit burl. If you're going straight into it, that burl or that gnarly grain is going to chip right out. But if you hit it at a 45-degree angle, it tends to razor blade it. It sort of shaves it better. And it's exactly the same principle that's happening in those bits. A straight bit will just hit that burl and pull it right out. A fluted bit will hit it from the top and slowly push it down. So it's really cutting it from a different angle. It's not cutting directly into it and pulling it out. It's shaving it off. And that's why those curved bits work so nicely. I mean, they work. I use them in the CNC machine too. They work really beautifully.
Nice. Router mounted in a router table. My worst fear in the shop.
Well, you reminded me of a funny story. I had to cut 2-inch thick walnut. I basically made a pattern out of 1/4-inch wood, and then I was going to use a pattern bit to cut 2-inch thick walnut. And I went and I bought this $150 bit. It's 1.5 inches long, about 1 inch wide, with a huge bearing on the top. And it's a pattern bit for cutting really thick wood. And I was so nervous to turn it on because I thought it was just going to pull the router out of my hand. And then, of course, ruin $100 and something. It was $120 bit. So what I did was I took the plate off the router, and I have 1/4-inch thick plexiglass, and I made a plate. I took the plate off and I used the same pole pattern, but instead of it being a round thing, I made it like a really long one, kind of like the ones that you see in Rockler, they used to make circles with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the circle. So I basically made a new router plate with a really long extension on it. And on top of it, I put like 2 or 3 of my steel weights in my shop. So that hung out onto the wood that stood. So in case I lost control of this thing, it wasn't going to go flying. It would just like pull away from the wood where it wasn't cutting anymore and not fly out of my hands. And so that I still use that from time to time when I have to use like a really heavy pattern bit, or I don't want to potentially lose control of the router. I screw on this. It's about 24 inches long, and I just stack weights on it. So now the router is I just have to literally muscle it around.
Yeah.
But that way I won't lose control of it.
So once you actually started it, what was your expectation, right? Like, did it actually try to pull away from you?
Well, the bit was so expensive and so sharp, it didn't pull away from me. But had I not really been paying attention, or if I try to climb cut with it, you guys understand the difference between climb cut. When you said you stuck the wood in the wrong direction, you can't climb cut on a routed table because it'll just yank out of your hands. So if I try to climb cut with a router bit that big, it would definitely pull out of my hands. So you got to be real careful, and just make sure every one of your joints from your chest up is all tense and ready to rock.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, really where I was at.
Yeah.
So just having that sled with the weights on it really was a little invention that came out. I mean, it's probably not an invention, but it was a good safety measure that I took that day.
Yeah. Speaking of like you said all your joints like tensing up. One of the other things on my list was, this seems really obvious, but losing a hand is
that's a big
something
one.
I am deathly afraid, and it's not losing a finger. I mean, that's no fun. I can imagine.
I could tell you about that a little bit.
Jimmy, I'm sure can attest that that's no fun at all. But losing a hand matters to me in a way that I don't know that it matters. Well, of course it matters to everybody. It matters to me because I'm a musician. I play piano since I was a kid, play guitar. I'm a programmer. I have to type as a job. I like to make things and I have to use my hand. So if I were to lose one of my hands fully, it would affect 90% of my life. And so that's different than like losing a finger. Yeah, I could work around a finger. I can still type, play guitar without a finger. But that's one thing that is just, man, the thought of that just scares me to death. And that's part of the motivation. Like I recently got, you guys talked me into getting a saw stop.
Yeah,
and regardless of all the stuff around that and the, whatever discussion there is about SawStop as a brand, I feel a whole lot better having that in my shop and knowing that, it minimizes the possibility of damage. Doesn't get rid of it totally, but it minimizes that. I know I'm not going to run my wrist through the table saw and lose a hand.
Yeah, I think a SawStop is a high quality piece of equipment. I've used it. I've used it in one of my videos. My friend owns it. I borrowed it at his shop in Louisville, and I think it's a fantastic machine. I can't wait till I get myself one.
It's well built. I have one myself, and when I bought a table saw, I'm like, I want to buy a table saw that is either going to last the rest of my life or at least for a good chunk of my life. And there's that safety feature, which it has the flesh sensing technology. If it senses flesh, a brake comes up, slams up against a blade, and throws a blade below the table. All happens in a fraction of a second. There's that. But I'm not affiliated with SawStop at all, but the table saw is really well built. It's heavy. It's very precise. It's well machined. It's a really, really good machine. And I highly recommend a SawStop to anybody. I was going to say a lot of table saw injuries are not just directly hands running into the blade. It's where you get kickback, where the board is pinching between the blade and the fence and comes back and it either hits you or you try to catch it. And during that catching phase, you run your hand into the blade. So
right.
Having a SawStop doesn't eliminate all that, but it definitely makes that a lot safer. I will say, since I had a Grizzly before that, a really old ratty Grizzly. Grizzly is a great brand, but the table saw that I had was just really old and not good. And I still take the same exact approach to a cut as I do now as I did before. Like I think about it. As long as you approach every cut and you think about what could happen, you're probably going to be okay. If you are prepared for that board to kick back, you're going to do things to prevent that. You're going to have downward pressure, or you're going to be out of the way of the cut. So just don't think that you're going to get a saw stop and then not worry and go at it willy-nilly. You still need to approach that machine like it could do some damage, which it can.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if anybody knows anybody at SawStop and you'd like to sponsor us,
my email address is David at.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, you guys, I mean, I think it's commonly known that I cut my pinky off on the table saw, and it was reattached. I cut about 90% through. It was just kind of a chunk of skin on the inside of my palm that didn't get cut. And it was just, I attribute it to not being in the present moment. I was thinking about several things, and the piece of wood I was adjusting the saw blade to caught the blade, shot through, hit me in the forearm while I was adjusting the saw blade up, and then my hand that was holding the wood ran across the blade. And I cut down the side of my palm and my pinky. And, it was just pure stupidity. And it was just me sort of being a hotshot thinking I didn't need to turn the saw off to adjust it into the wood. And unfortunately, I got bit by the tiger is what I say. I mean, I've owned the table saw now for over 20 years, and it's still the same saw I use every day. And I do plan on getting a saw stop soon. And I really would love to. But one thing that scares me the most that I see everybody do on a table saw is they cut a piece of wood as if they're using a chop saw. They set the fence up, say, 10 inches away from the blade, and then they want to cut off a piece of wood that's only 5 inches wide. So the rule of thumb in my shop is anything that passes between the blade and the fence has to be longer front to back than it is between the fence and the thing. And I see people all the time on YouTube and other places taking a piece of wood and passing it through. Like, let's say they have a 2x4 and they set the fence up maybe at 20 inches, and then they're passing that 2x4 at every 20 inches. That is one of the most dangerous things to do on a table saw, because that piece of wood will now bind between the fence and the blade. There's not enough contact with the fence to stabilize that cut. Yeah. The rule of thumb that we always say is I won't even cut a square. If it's a perfect square, that scares me. It always has to be longer front to back than it is between the fence and the blade. And I mean, I think that's just a general rule of thumb. Go ahead, Dave.
And exactly. That's when you need a really good miter fence or a sled. I use a sled myself because it just makes the process a lot easier. Yeah, and
sled
safer.
really eliminates so much danger if you use a sled on a table saw when it comes to doing a lot of cuts.
And speaking of that, since I made my table saw sled, I haven't used my chop saw at all. I just use my table saw for both ripping and cutting. So that sled is a safety feature, and it can eliminate another tool that you may not need. So.
Yeah, actually, somebody wrote me. One of my fans wrote me a note, and he said, "I was watching you do some YouTube, and I did it, and I cut my fingers on the table saw blade."
Oh,
and I felt so horrible. And we wrote back and forth. I said, "What exactly did you do?" And we went back and forth. And he didn't do what I did. He was trying to make box joints without a sled. He was making box joints like between the thing and the fence. What he expected wasn't exactly what I did. And what happened was a piece of wood shot out of the way and his hand touched the top of the blade.
Okay. So we should talk about, like, when you get a new tool, you should really know how to use that tool. I mean, beyond just what's in that owner's manual. Like, if you have a friend who's done this before, YouTube's a great place. YouTube's also a great place to learn the wrong thing too. But
yeah. Well, that's it. We had a long conversation. We went back and forth through the email. He's from Mexico. And I said, "What exactly did you do?" And he told me, and we went back and forth. I said, "You didn't do what I did." I said, "If you go back and watch the video," he goes, "Oh, well, yeah, I never made myself a sled." I was like, so, I mean, he wasn't blaming me, but he was just saying like, "Hey, look, I got hurt doing your thing." Like, he was sort of asking me what he did wrong. And I said, you weren't using a sled that was in the two slides on the table. He was using the fence. So what happened was it binded and turned sideways. And if he had a table saw sled or made a box joint sled that ran the two rails in his table saw, the whole unit wouldn't have binded and wouldn't have shot out of the way, leaving the space for his hand to touch the blade. And so going back to your point, David, how safe a table saw sled can make the table saw if used correctly.
Yeah.
That was one of the things about my old saw that I had before the saw stop, was that it was one of the fold up type of saws, so you could fold it up, roll it somewhere, and it had all these nice little features for taking it places and making it portable. But it only had one fixed slot, on one
Yeah.
side of the blade. And I
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as I got that thing home the first time, I was like, I don't understand what they were thinking when they did this. Cause I don't know. I mean, if you're using a miter fence and you're just wanting to cut off like an end of something, I guess that makes sense. But you couldn't make an effective sled with that thing.
Yeah.
And that was one of the big reasons that I wanted to get rid of that thing.
Well, some guys make sleds that go over the whole table, so the rails are the two outer edges of the table, depending upon how smooth they are.
I did that, and because that was my workaround for it, but it just never quite, just never quite worked.
Nothing beats those two machine slots in the top of either the saw stop or the Delta saw, the Unisaw. Those things really are, they were thought through. I have the Unisaw from, the 40s and one from the 70s, and those machine slots are exactly the same diameter. It's amazing that they had that forethought when they first made those units to keep that standard. So I mean, a lot of other brands, I'm pretty sure SawStop brand is the same width and diameter as the ones made from Delta Unisaw. I'm just guessing.
Yeah,
but they look like they are.
I will say that the two miter slots in my old Grizzly don't line up with the two miter slots in my SawStop because my old sleds did not work, so I had to make new sleds.
Right.
But
right.
As a woodworkers, we love making jigs. So.
Yeah, you got another project.
Another project. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Anybody else got any big tools that are super scary?
I just got a I'm sorry. I just got a new drill press. My previous drill presses aren't really scary, right? But my previous drill press was a benchtop one. And it's I outgrew it. I needed more travel. I needed more strength, actually. So I got a big floor standing model. And wow, this thing is super powerful. I'm not really scared of it, but I'm like, if a piece of clothing got caught in there, or just like if a big Forstner bit caught in the wood and spun it around, like that could do some damage. And so anytime I get a new tool, I just have to step back and respect it, learn what can go wrong before I approach each cut.
One thing, I got a new drill press. It's been about a year or so, but it's the same kind of thing. It was just ridiculously more powerful than the one I had before. And the thing I found to be able to control it and to not feel like I was just going to have the piece spin on me was I had to go the RPM, that you can set by the bands on the top. What I thought I needed there, I had to take it down about half of that and work up to what I actually needed because it was just too much. I mean, there was just too much power there for that thing. And it's a great drill press, but I had to kind of work up to what actually I needed to use.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jimmy, but a lot of times these drill presses, they're made for woodworking and some metalworking. So that's why they have these different speeds. And so you don't need the highest speed when you're drilling a hole in a piece of wood. One, that's just too much speed. Two, you're going to get some burning, and the cutting tool is not as effective.
Well, when you cut metal, it's typical. Most times you cut metal, you cut slow. Okay. And if you're cutting like a hole saw, like for instance, when you're cutting like using a hole saw to say like notch the end of a tube of steel. So like if you're making like welding, if you're like making like a bicycle frame where one tube intersects the other tube, you need to slow the drill press down considerably. I mean, and then Bob talking about slowing the drill press down, it's also something that you need to be extremely careful of because when the drill press is super slow, it's super strong. So if you get a piece of clothing or something, it's just going to pull you in slowly. And, fortunately that's never happened to me. There have been instances where I've had like either my bandana or something got caught in it and I just immediately tense up and it just rips away. I mean, it's only happened a couple times in my life and I've been in the shop since I was a little kid. So, when I was a little kid, this is when these type of things happen. Like what's happened sometimes I'm like drilling metal and it's oily. So I always keep a rag nearby. And there have been instances where the rag got caught in the drill press and I just let it go. I mean, people also complain sometimes in my videos I'm wearing gloves when I'm using the drill press. And I agree that is not smart. That's just me, quickly going from a weld to a drill back and forth. And it's important to take your gloves off when you're using a drill press. Extremely important.
And that's a good point to make that. It's an inverse proportion of strength to speed because the torque goes up as the speed goes down on those things. So, Hey, is that the same? I guess that same principle applies like to your milling machine, right?
Oh yeah. No, the milling machine is just, it's super, like I said, if you have like a flying cutting head on it, which is like, it appears to be like this big, but when it's spinning, it's that big. And I just made my fingers like an inch and then like 5 inches because that flying cutting head's swinging in space like a helicopter blade. So I make so sure like I don't have a bandana. If there's oil all over, I just make sure the rags are completely away. There was one time I was using the CNC machine, and this is just a CNC machine with a bit the size of a skinny pencil diameter, and I was wiping oil away, and the bit got sucked into the CNC machine, and I literally just I had to yank it quick, and it pulled a big tuft off the end of the rag, and it was whipping on the end of the milling machine. Not the milling machine, the CNC, my ShopBot, and I had to slap the thing off. ShopBot's got like a panic button where if anything goes wrong, you just instantly slap it and it shuts off. And so, like I said, it's important if you're going to use some of these machines in the event that something could go wrong, just either keep your hand near the switch or on the plug, and you can just immediately yank the plug out or whatever it is. While I get the stage, I just want to say another extremely dangerous tool that everybody should respect is a handheld circular saw. It's the kind of thing you always see like in a theater shop or something like that. People are always like, oh, go get the circular saw. It's the kind of thing that everybody has access to, but is one of the most dangerous hand tools. And I recently was working upstate, and my guide swung up and stayed up. It didn't bounce back down. So I literally cut something, and I went to put the saw down, and it shot across the room because the guard didn't close. I took that circular saw, and I threw it right in the garbage because it wasn't a high quality one, and I got like 10 of them because people give me tools all the time. They're all like skills or, not the highest quality versions of these units, but those things are extremely dangerous. And you always see guys on roofing crews, they hold the guard up. They like stick a chunk of wood in it to keep the guard up because it gets in their way. But that is one of the most dangerous tools to have lying around. And like I said, people think, oh, it's a saw. Let me just use a saw. I see so many amateurs using them, and it really scares me.
Yeah, so funny note on that. Like when I did my video about the downdraft table, I pulled the guard back on it and held the front against the table and plunged it down into the table to make that cut. And I made a point to say that this is something you shouldn't do unless you're comfortable. There was a comment.
I remember that.
There was a comment down there that said something like, "You've been hanging out with Jimmy Diresta too long."
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the best. I think I don't get advertisers and stuff. David and I would talk because I'm like just such a wild card. I'm so dangerous, and I'm not really dangerous. I'm so comfortable using these tools. But when people watch me, they stick their fingers into the table saw blade. Unfortunately, but.
Yeah,
I'm just so comfortable doing things.
That's an important thing to point out, though, is like, we each, and we may have already talked about this at some point, but there's an acceptable level of risk that you take on, and that comes with experience, right? And your experience, those years have helped you or caused you to raise that acceptable amount of risk to yourself, but that's different for every single person and every single tool. And
Absolutely. I mean, people see me using the bandsaw all the time, and they're like, oh my God, when I have like a skip tooth on the bandsaw blade, like a resaw blade, like a 4 TPI, believe me, I have a lot of respect for that blade because that blade will suck you in. It'll grab you and pull you in. Mm-hmm. Like those are very dangerous. But when I have like a bimetal blade, a 14 TPI on there, it'll just, it won't cut to the bone that fast. So I'm not that worried.
not that fast. It'll do it.
I saw a video of Sam Malouf cutting kind of like freestyle these big, I think they were rocker legs on the bandsaw, and he kind of swoops them in there and takes the edges off before he does some final spoke shaving. And I was like, oh yeah, that's how you do that. And so the one time I'm like, I take a board into the bandsaw and I'm going to do this like swooping, curving cut.
Whack.
And whack it. The blade takes the wood and slams it against the table. And you have no idea, like it doesn't seem like it's spinning that fast, but you have no idea how much force there is until you actually feel the blade catch that wood and slam it against the table. And from there, I'm like, oh yeah, there always needs to be support under the wood. Like this video that I saw of Sam Malouf didn't show that the wood was actually supported underneath there, or maybe it did, but I just didn't see it. So lesson learned.
All right. Well, what about non-tool things? Let's go a little bit deeper. We got anything that they're just... I can start if you want. I
Sure.
got a good one. All right, so one of the things that I'm afraid of, and this is maybe... Yeah, I'm afraid of it, is not passing on something to my kids. I mean, there's a lot of things I want to pass on to my kids, but I'm not sure how to pass on curiosity to kids. I'm not sure exactly how to make them like inherently curious about how to do things, how stuff works, you know, all that stuff. And that's one of the things, like that and being compassionate are the two things that I really want my kids to like. I think that has a profound effect on who they are and what they do and how they do stuff. And those are two things that I don't really know how to, like, there's no formula, you know, for teaching those things to kids. So I'm just kind of doing my best with trying to get them to be curious. Like I posted a picture a while back on Instagram about, I gave my son some, my 7-year-old, some screwdrivers and an old VCR. And I was like, hey, take this apart. And he's like, what do you mean take it apart? I'm like, just take it apart. He's like, well, what if I mess it up? And I said, you cannot mess this up. Like, you can break anything on it that you want. You can destroy any part of it because it doesn't matter. I just want you to take it apart. And he was just, he didn't get it, you know, but he started unscrewing stuff and he was like, oh, this is fun. And so I think stuff like that may be one way to
get him kickstart.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, sure, it's okay for you to try to figure things out. And it's okay if you break something along the way, you know, to figure it out. But that's something I think is really important. And I'm not really sure how to pass on.
Yeah, I don't think you can, you mentioned compassion. I don't think you can, that's something you can teach, but that's something you can show by example, you know? Like,
Yeah.
just show that you care about people and feelings. Whether you're a kid or an adult, you just pick up on other people around you doing that. So,
yeah. I mean, my parents were both very kind and compassionate people. And I remember I grew up with a lot of thieves and thugs and guys that got in trouble and went to jail and stuff. And I never did any of those things. And people ask me all the time. I just said this in my class the other day. And why did I avoid all that? Because I remember my dad said to me when he was a kid, he said, don't embarrass me. And I just remember, like, you know, when I think, I'm like, okay, we're going to go into this house to buy drugs or whatever. I'm talking like when I'm 16 and the guys are buying marijuana. I'm like, and I know where I grew up, if you get caught buying drugs, like everybody gets arrested, the car gets taken away by the police. It was like this drug sting thing in the 80s. And I always, like, if they were going to go buy marijuana, I would just stay behind because I didn't want to be part of that dragnet. And I always stayed behind. And if they were going to go do something wrong, I always just stayed back. I'm like, just tell me how it was. And I always heard my dad's voice in my head saying, don't embarrass me. So I was always, I mean, talk about things we're afraid of. I was always afraid I was going to get in trouble and embarrass my dad. And, you know, he's very proud of me now, needless to say. He's alive and well, and he compliments me constantly. And he said his dad told him that, just don't embarrass me. And, you know, and then when I see these kids getting arrested and doing like these crazy things, and I'm just like, how do they face their parents?
yeah.
You know? So, Bob, tell your kids that.
Yeah. I'll tell them not to embarrass me.
Good tip.
Any other tools? Any other tools or things that are scary?
Not tool related, but not as deep as what Bob was talking about, is sometimes I don't know how people are going to react to my videos. Like the first time I made a CNC video, I was telling my wife, I'm like, this is not going to go over well. These people they're not going to like it. This isn't woodworking. And then it went over really well. Like no negative comments, and everybody's like, oh, that's so cool. And I think I need to not be so quick to judge my viewers and just not be afraid to try new things. I think that goes with a lot of things. Don't be afraid to try new things, you know?
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's funny. I haven't done as much leather work as I wanted to do. And Taylor, my girlfriend, is very good at leather work. And so this Sunday we sat down and I didn't Instagram it or anything, but I'll show you guys. I mean, maybe you could put a picture. I made a leather wallet.
Yes.
And
of course,
it's one thing
for the viewers, it says Diresta right on the top there. So.
I imprint that. So one thing I'm always like, I always have intentions of doing leather work, but I keep like, I pull back and I'm like, nah, not till I'm better at it. But then I'm afraid to even do it when I'm alone, you know, off camera. So that's something I'm going to try and do. I started a project about a year ago and part of it involved leather work. And when in my mind, I had to like confront the leather work, I backed away. And the client called me. He's a friend, actually. He called me. He's like, hey, whatever happened to those things you were going to make? And I didn't tell him, but in my mind, I was like, it's because I didn't want to confront the leather work. But the other night, Taylor and I had a conversation about it. I said, Eric is back on board with this project, and she's going to handle it, and I'm going to handle the hardware. And together we're going to do it in the video. So look forward to that. I'm making a gun rack for my friend's gun collection.
Nice. That's interesting that you guys bring that up about like changing the type of video that you have on your channel, because I've had 3 conversations about that with 3 different people in the last 2 days. So I was in a Google Hangout last night. This guy that I don't know was doing a hangout talking about YouTube videos, and there were people in there asking him questions. And one of the guys was saying, I make guitars, and I fix cars, and I make furniture, and I do all this different stuff, and I'm afraid to put it all on a single YouTube channel because I don't want, I don't want people to be scared away if they like guitars, but they don't like the car stuff or whatever the case may be. And I've had another guy that I'm not going to say who it is, but he does woodworking, and he does off camera, does a ton of metal work, and is a brilliant guy. And he's afraid to do metal work on his channel because people have come to expect woodworking. So he's afraid to do this, and I've told him I think that people would absolutely eat it up. They would love it, But anyway, last night in this hangout, what I was telling the guy was that I was trying to tell him from the comments was that I think it's all about expectation. And so if you set the expectation of your audience that I make wood stuff. If that's the expectation, yes, it's going to seem out of character if you do something that's very, very different. If you all of a sudden put a gaming video on your channel, that's very different, and that breaks the expectation. That's going to catch them off guard. But if you set the expectation of this is exactly what I do. I'm going to make stuff, right? There's a reason I called it that. So the expectation is the making, is the production, is the process of things, not the thing. And I think that probably applies to a lot more of us, of the people that make videos than we realize. That the people's expectation of us is that we're going to show them how to do something, or we're going to show them how to make something. And what we make and how we make it is probably a little less important to them than, seeing the material or the process or, whatever the case may be. So I would say if, either one of you guys or anybody else listening is worried about that, throwing off their audience by bringing in a new medium or a new type of thing or whatever, I would say try it. It's my personal opinion. But
I agree. It's well said. I mean, there are times where I have ideas and I'm stalling on them because I'm like waiting for like the good left turn that I could introduce into the video. I know, like for instance, I started the video, but I haven't gotten too far with this crisp bladed knife, the knife that's wavy. I've Instagrammed a lot of pictures of it, but I'm kind of stalled on exactly what the handle should be. And I'm like, should it be some leather work? Should it be this? Should it be that? I had an intention to put it in a cane, which might still be the case, but then it's an odd looking cane because it's too wide. So I'm just trying to think of the right thing, and so I'm like nervous I'm going to mess up what was started out as a really good video. It looks great right up till now. And now I got to finish it. And I'm like sort of a little intimidated to finish it, making sure I make the right decision. So I'm just stepping back and just waiting. It'll come to me.
Do you think there is a right decision in something like that? I mean, it's
good question.
It's an artistry, right?
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, I just want to make a decision that
you're happy with.
That I'm happy with. Yeah, I mean, of course I'll do something that everyone's going to hate because it's not going to be traditional and it's going to be some odd method. But when I say everyone, I'm talking about my trolls. Those 5 guys. No, I go ahead, Dave.
What are you going to do to help you decide that? Are you going to set this blade next to different materials and do the squinty eyed look at it to see what's going to work, or are you just going to let it sit in your brain?
It'll sit in my brain, and then one day, I'll be driving, and someone will walk in front of my car with a pair of leather pants on with a certain stitch, and I'll say, that's it. That's exactly how these things come to me. When I least expect it.
I love that answer.
Something.
Yeah.
There's this whole all these films are playing in the background in my mind, and when two things when a plug goes into the right hole, boom! I'm like, shoot, that's how I have to handle that. So yeah, no, you just never know. You just always got to be always have that unconscious mind working in the background. Your
Yeah.
subconscious, unconscious mind is always exercised and working in the background.
Remove those blocks and let those gears turn.
Yeah. I just in getting back quick, I made this chisel video, and I made the handle out of brass. I specifically did this because a lot of my fans are like, "Oh my God, the chisel nerds are going to get upset with you. You can't, how dare you try and restore a chisel?" So I Googled chisel handle, and I wanted to see what I've never saw a chisel handle made out of. And I just didn't see a chisel handle made out of brass, at least not in my search. Not to say that it doesn't exist. So I made the chisel handle out of brass. So the chisel nerds are going to say it's too heavy, it's not going to work, it's going to shine in your eyes when you're trying to carve. So,
Okay, so next you have to make a pair of sunglasses to stop it from shining in your
chisel. And so I don't know. On that note, be safe. And always use tools at your comfort level. And
just think about what you're when you approach a tool. Just think about the cut that you're going to do. Don't just do it.
Yeah, always be present. Like I said, if you can learn anything from my mistake when I cut my pinky, it's just always be present. I had too many things in my mind, and I literally tried to do something within 5 minutes. I'm like, I have 5 minutes to do this. Let me try this, and I wasn't present.
And Dave made a good point earlier. If you know somebody that actually already knows how to do something, knows how to use a new tool or a technique that you're not familiar with, get somebody to show you firsthand, because that's pretty valuable, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a good place to wrap it up for this episode. And I want to tell you guys before we go about some changes we made to our Patreon. Well, a few things. We got a couple announcements here. Okay. We made some changes to our Patreon page. We added some new rewards and a goal, and the goal is for us to record this show weekly. So we'd like to be able to get there. We've gotten a lot of really awesome support there, and we really appreciate it. If you guys want to continue to help us try to get to that goal, that would be great. We added some new rewards, and it's actual stuff. We're going to make some Making It t-shirts, and the only way you can get these t-shirts is if you support us on Patreon at a certain level. So we're not going to be selling them. They're just for Patreon guys. And then also we have at other levels where you can pick whether you get one of David's shirts, one of my shirts, one of Jimmy's hats, some handmade stuff by all three of us. So we've added a lot of stuff there. Be sure to go to patreon.com/makingit. You can find out all the details and all that stuff. The second thing is that we finally started a Twitter account, which is just @makingitpodcast. So you can follow us there, and we'll try to do some special stuff there that we're not doing on our individual Twitter accounts. But for this week, for the next episode, we want you to give us questions. We're going to kind of do like a lightning round, answer some questions in the next episode, really quick answers. And so pour as many questions at that Twitter handle as you can over the next 2 weeks, and we will bust out a bunch of answers. So also, fun. I want to thank Nicholas Gomez for his support on Patreon. He's like our top supporter. And
thanks, Nick.
We really
thank you, Nick.
He's an awesome
Thank you
guy.
very much.
So before we go, where can we find out about everybody? Dave?
You can find me at drunkenwoodworker.com. That has my blog, all my videos, and links to all my social media sites. Jimmy?
I'm going to push my Instagram because it's been growing rapidly, and I'm really feeding my Instagram pictures leading up to my videos. So take a look for me, Jimmy Diresta, on Instagram.
Yeah, and all my stuff is at iliketomakestuff.com. You can get to all the social media and stuff there. I also enjoy Instagram quite a bit. So, yeah, check us all out. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.